Thanks very much for coming to listen to this paper. There's only two of us, Lowther from the Centre, Newcastle University Centre for Learning and Teaching, but she couldn't make it today, so no mailing. So I want to talk to you about something of a much more modest scale. It's about a project that I'm currently piloting on one of my first year French language module. Is for students who have an A-level in French and carry on with that at university level. So the module is called FA 171. It's got about 120 students on it, and those students are probably half of them study languages full time, and then you've got another 25% who are from combined degrees, and another 25% who may be studying physics but decided to keep French as a module if they had an in the language. So it's a very mixed audience in a way. The objective of the module, the main objective as far as I'm concerned, apart from the linguistic one, which is obvious, is to encourage my students to become autonomous learners. So that will be of paramount importance for the rest of their studies. So to foster autonomy. And that's something that's becoming increasingly important to me, and especially when I started reading L2 motivation theory, so what motivates students in language learning. And there's somebody called Emma Lowther, I'm not trying to pronounce it right, and she writes an article which is why foster or why promote autonomy, and she explains that for years the research in the field of motivation theory was much more concerned about idealized language learners seen as theoretical abstractions, and that in fact now is moving more toward the idea that learners are unique and complex individuals, and they have particular social identities and are in particular context. And that applies really to my module, seeing the varied background. So she explained that there is a need to move away from achievement-oriented analysis of motivation to what she calls identity-oriented analysis of personal motivation trajectories. Sounds a bit complicated, but in fact it's the idea that we need to help our learners find the motivation within themselves, but also in language context. Instead of telling them to say what to think about France, or is not France wonderful, is how can you express your own self through French, which is a different way of approaching it. And so she says that there is a need to foster autonomy, therefore, because that's the only way to encourage students to experience what's called the personal sense, of personal agency and self-determination, which is vital to developing their motivation from within. So to do so, last year I increased the percentage of the portfolio element. Why? Because the portfolio is the best way in order to promote autonomy and independent work. So it went from 10% to 30% of the module mark. It's not easy, the border study was a bit reluctant, but managed to do that anyway somehow. Got away with it. So my objective over the years, not straight away, those baby steps, but my objective would be for the portfolio to be that, basically. That it includes the students' active participation, their reflection on students' experience, self-assessment, their involvement in deciding and selecting criteria for evaluation. Because it's a big modules, like trying to push an elephant up the hill, you've got to do it step by step, but that's what I've got in mind. So the portfolio as it is now, it's made up of all of the weekly written tasks that they complete throughout the semester. So every week they've got to write 250 words in French about a theme related to the seminar, and then about an audio document, what they thought about it, so expressing their opinion more. And then they submit all that, and they've got to have 6 mistake analysis. So their work is collected every other week or every third week, and then we don't tell them we don't correct their mistakes, we tell them what kind of mistake it is, and then they've got to correct their mistakes and submit that as part of the portfolio. On top of that, and that's the subject of this presentation, they've got fortnightly e-portfolio tasks. So those tasks are done through the university's e-portfolio. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those. That's something that's being rolled out. It's kind of sort of a big diary / blog that the students have. At first it was for master's students, now it's also for graduate students, where they can record all of their skills. So we've got at Newcastle University the undergraduate skills framework. So every module corresponds to that, and the students can stick what they've done and write their CV. And basically the idea that when they leave the university, they've got a record, a log of what they've done in terms of employability. So I decided to use that for them to complete tasks in French about on the portfolio about careers, awareness, and employability. And that replaces tasks that they used to write, such as, what do you think of French cinema? And basically they had no idea. So now they write on something that's directly relevant to them at this stage. So I want to show you the e-portfolio, but basically that's Helen who was in charge of that. And she's not here, so I'll just skip that if you don't mind. If you've got the other time, I might show it to you later. I'm not the techie person. So the tasks were developed in collaboration with the university's career service and the learning and teaching unit. In a way, there was a paper that was by Filippo Nero last year, and he explained that it was really a game of getting all the parameters right between careers, e-learning teams, students and academics, and that's exactly the way it was here. It's not always easy to get all of them to work properly, but once you get that, it was really useful because the careers person, who was really good, helped me design the questions. So because I'm not the careers person, so she knew exactly what kind of stuff would work with them. So then I found links to the modules, activities and the seminars, and also to school-wide events in careers, and all that works together. So I'll give you a list of the last point that they're all in French, obviously, to encourage code switching. So most of the input will be from university, from their everyday life in English, and they've got to transform that into proper, decent French. So some examples. The first task was very basic. I asked the careers person who helped me to give a presentation about being a fresher, the kind of presentation we get always anyway. And the e-portfolio officer, Helen, asked her to come and explain to them how the e-portfolio works and to demonstrate it to them. And then they had to write a summary in French saying, what did you get out of that session? And that was in a way a good way for me to check understanding and check that they were fine with all the parameters of the task. The second one was presenting in a professional context. So in the seminar, we played Dragon's Den. So they had to prepare group presentations. It was exactly like Dragon's Den. I used the Canadian version. And they had to present, and I say the instruction was very clear, and that was marked. You had to present as professionally as you can. And they really played along. And then in the portfolio time, they had to reflect upon that. They had video on how to present professionally, efficiently, that was all in French. They had to watch that, reassess their own presentation, think about what they'd done and how they could improve that, or what they would do differently if they could. The third one was linked to the first careers talk. So I would organize a careers talk every semester. Normally I ask the person who's about no more than 10 years older than them. Unfortunately, they've got to best before date as well, so after 10 years, you're not relevant anymore, current, and they don't care anymore. So you've got to find past graduates with an alumni society. I like them to come and talk about what they do, but I don't want them to be teachers, translators. Basically, I want them to be graduates of modern languages, but to have done something completely different, so that to, kind of make them think, well, I don't have to be a teacher or a translator if I study language. There are lots of other jobs. So the first person was from a communications agency, and she was very good at showing what you can do with your languages. So they had to say in the portfolio, what did I think about the presentation? Did it bring anything to me or not? And it made me think about the other possibilities, what's out there. And the fourth task that had to be before Christmas was a value exercise. So who am I? What kind of stuff do I like? Or what does it say about what I would be better at or not so good at? So the idea is to really gently, slowly but surely make them think about careers awareness and what they might want to do later on. It's not a matter of telling them decide now, but be aware that they have an impact. And why in the first year? Because we realized that in the first year they're just freshers, they don't care. In the second year they're Eurobroad obsessed. You can't tell them about anything but the Eurobroad, they won't listen to you. And then finally, they come back and then they panic. And I'm graduating in a year's time. Nobody ever told me a thing about what I should do. So we thought we've got to catch them from the beginning. And also, they kind of have an idea, they start thinking what they might want to do. They might choose their year road path differently. Instead of just going to university, they might do a placement relevant to what they might want to do later on. So the aims and objectives of the project, well, ideally, so by the end of the project, ideally the students will have become aware of the need for them to engage with their learning of French in an autonomous and personal way, something that's relevant to them through the medium of French. Become familiar with the university's e-portfolio and its career service, and they have increased their overall careers awareness. So I asked them to fill in a questionnaire before Christmas. So it's a midpoint questionnaire really at each stage, only one semester has happened yet. It was quite a good response rate, so I was quite pleased about that. But it's still early days, so you can't have definite conclusions. But there were some surprising findings, and actually some of them are reflecting what I heard this morning. So the first one is not too surprising, were there technical problems. So 60% said yes, and asked them what were they, and the most common problem was sharing. On the e-portfolio you've got to share with your tutor, because it's kind of a blog entry. So, and in fact sharing is a two-way street. And the problems were a bit complex, because sharing is not very straightforward on it, that could be improved. The other problem is that FA 1071 has 9 seminar groups. So there are, I think, 5 different staff teaching on it. Not all of them really engage with it, and that's normal. They have other things to do. They're not that keen, not as motivated as I would be. So they kind of thought, oh, if the students can't share, I'm not bothered. And it's very hard to get everyone behind that, and it takes time. So I'm hoping that next year, when they will be more familiar with it, they know what to tell the students and how to get them to share properly. And the third thing that there were proper technical problems, but even kind of said, I don't know. So that's got to be looked into. It's not always as reliable as it could be. And then I asked, will you benefit from having a training session, because they were introduced to it in a lecture, but would it be beneficial to do it in seminar? And then they said, well, 44% said no, and well actually 60% had problems, why is just 44% to say no? But in fact that's because it kind of happened ad hoc. But in the seminars we did try to take the time to explain it to them. Helen came, so they thought, well, it was not necessary to add to that. But I think it would be more beneficial at the beginning of next year to have seminars, in the seminars to really show to them and guide them step by step. Because we must bear in mind that they're freshers, everything is new, even Blackboard is new to them, so you've got to take it really slowly with them. I asked if the portfolio was relevant to them, as a place where they could upload their work. And that's why it's a bit surprising, because 49% of them said it was not so good. And although 68% said that they prefer the paper-handed. So that's what I heard this morning. Sometimes the good old ways are the best ways for the students. They don't all want to be in front of the computer or to take advantage of the computer, as some are afraid of it. Some of them said, well, I'm worried that I didn't really submit it. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel, you don't have the, and there's not enough follow-up, there's no lecture saying, well, thank you for submitting it. They need the reassurance. So there would be, some work would have to be done on that to make sure that they get more of a sense of an exchange, that it's a proper place to go to. I asked if they took advantage, but one of the objectives was that they would do their tasks on the portfolio, and then they would take advantage of that to tick the boxes, look at their CV, start exploring it and using it, because it's a great facility for them. So I said, did you do that? And only 16% of them said yes, yes a little 8%, no 68%, oh, damn. And then, that was the glimmer of hope, 6% said no, but I will. So there is hope. So we'll see in December if they have. I can double check, sorry, in the end of semester 2 I can double check and ask again, see if that's increased. So I'll talk about that later on as well, but what can be done to help that. And then I asked if they thought that the careers talk was interesting. 59% of them said yes. There was a few problems with the speaker, because prior to that you invite a speaker, but they're not lecturers, they're not teachers. but that was the point. And they don't really know how to engage a lecture theatre full of 120 students necessarily. People think that they will come in, storm in, and it'll be brilliant, and have a like slow clap when they leave. It doesn't really happen like that. So that's something that we decided to work on. We've got a student intern working on the next one, and we'll brief the speaker now, which can't necessarily do. But what's positive, that 75% of them thought that such talks did motivate them. And that was interesting that, as soon as the first year, it was good to hear people talk about their future professional experiences. And that it's made them think about their own professional or careers development. So more to the point, the task and the seminar content. So I asked them if they thought that the link between the task and the portfolio was clear enough, and that they could see it. So I would have in mind try them then, such activities, and they thought that for 89% of them, so 90 roughly, that it was good and it was useful and it was something that they liked. So that was very positive as well. And I asked them if they could see the linguistic benefit, and that brought to, that went up to 96%, sorry. 96% of them thought it was positive linguistically, either useful or very useful. So only 1.2 not very useful, so that was good. Although this 1.2, the comment that comes back, I prefer more traditional activities. So you never have everyone happy if you try to innovate. So they say, well, I'd rather write about French cinema. So, fair enough. And then I asked, is it generally positive? What do you think about it? Is it good development? And 78% of them thought that it was. One of the questions was, did you find the portfolio tasks useful? Interesting, and once you answer, I thought that was really good. I didn't find them interesting, because they're tasks, so they wouldn't be, but they were useful. Because that's fair enough, I can take that, that's a good answer, I like that. So yeah, so that was quite positive, and I kind of selected some comments that I thought were rather representative. So what I liked is the idea that they explore proper issues rather than topics. And that leads me back to the motivation theory I was talking about. The idea that instead of going through topics that are imposed on them, they can explore issues that are relevant to them in the French language. So basically they can start creating their own sense of French identity, thinking about their own future. So that's something I want to push further, is you can't do it at the whole module level, you couldn't have assessment otherwise, or you wouldn't have the common basis, but it's something you can probably bring more of in your language teaching. They thought that the skills could be used in everyday life. I like that pushes me out of my comfort zone. I'm always pleased when I hear students say that. I feel like I'm useful by pushing them out of their comfort zone. And we're able to express our own opinions, our views and opinions in French. So that's quite good as well. And it makes you think about the future while using French. So that's rather positive in terms of my ideal objectives, with the two keywords being relevant and useful, the word that came back the most. So were my objectives met? Well, the first objective, which was to become aware of the need for them to engage with their learning in French in an autonomous and personal way relevant to them, as I've shown, is pretty much met. They would all say that that was the case. My second objective was for them to become familiar with the university portfolio career service. That was partly met, but not entirely. You still have students who didn't really engage with it, especially the portfolio. Career is more, the career service they're more aware of it, but not the portfolio. And the last one, to increase their overall careers awareness. Well, it's hard to tell, but given some of the above comments, it's on its way, I would say. And because we're like halfway through it, it's not too bad. So, the issue there, some are not convinced about the relevance of the portfolio itself. There is not enough student input to date for a career talk. That's issue that I had myself as well as the issues raised by the students. So if you remember what my ideal portfolio would be like, there was students' participation in selecting and setting the criteria, and we don't have enough of that there either. So I said, I've got one student who is organising the next career talk, so it means that there is input from the student from that cohort, but it's not on a large scale yet. And some students, not many, are still not sure about the linguistic benefits. That's something I have to work on to really explain to them what code switching is. That can be everyday life language turned into something relevant. So the idea that some of them said, but you didn't give us the vocabulary. We're like, well, you could have looked it up because I don't know what you're going to write about. So you've got to become autonomous in what you select and how you go about it. So to resolve those problems, I've got a new project in the pipeline, which I'll actually introduce next September, is to create basically e-portfolio ambassadors sort of thing. So to ask final year students, 3 or 4 of them, to read the portfolio tasks on a regular basis and to give feedback on the French, maybe 1 or 2 things that they could improve, but also to give feedback on the content. Say if a student says, well, I can't really bother to think about it, and to understand it's so far away, say, well, we'd like to come and have a chat, maybe we could talk about it. But I was like you when I started, and then I realized that, you know, maybe I started a bit late thinking about those issues. So, and that's going to solve more than one problem, because I think they can't see the point in having an e-portfolio, because they can't see that it can be interactive, a social network. Whereas if you introduce this element of peer assessment, of peer contact, then the e-portfolio really becomes a relevant place for them to put their blog entries. Because they know that they will have a reply, that somebody will look at it, that there'll be interaction, and they can choose to share it with everybody else if they so wished, So then it really becomes alive, the e-portfolio for them. That would be the first steps toward introducing the scope of languages, something called employability ambassador that's been doing in other schools with students, helping other students with career issues. That's it. Thank you.
As we started the session, we've got some minutes for questions. Can I ask a question? It's about the e-portfolio. You say that you can work as well as you expected. And you also mentioned that the student told you, well, you didn't give us the vocabulary, so you were expecting them to look for that. I was wondering whether in this second section you're going to do, will you think about providing them some kind of tools so they can improve their independent learning in this? Do you think that their French was good enough to perform those tasks?
Oh yeah, because they only have, they have to write, say, 200 words, and there are words they don't know. they're not. So they can look it up in a dictionary.
So it's just a question of.
It's just a question of saying they're being lazy. I write about it if you give me a list of words, so I know some of the words. Because they've got to learn basically what happens to them, then they go abroad, and then suddenly they realize that, in fact, we saw they were to learn lots of vocabulary, but maybe they never use some words because we all pick and choose what we're going to use. That's how we learn the language. Basically, some words are never relevant to us. So sometimes you spend 20 years never hearing the words, or if you thought, or never been aware of the word, and then somebody tells you about this word, you hear it all the time suddenly. So we pick and choose, and they've got to learn to do that straight away, to choose what's relevant to them.
Wait for you to give everything on a...
Exactly, but we should not encourage that. We should encourage them to go get it.
Can I ask what sort of portfolio you used? Was it paper, pen, and
I have no idea. You can't what I can tell you. The university's one is my answer. So if I can, I'll show you, but I have no idea. It's the university system, so it's going to be working on.
did you connect students up by using any group function? Because you can have, you connect the students in the class and they can share each other's work. We created sort of a blog community in the e-portfolio, and then they could decide to share it with everyone. But because it's first years and they don't know each other so well in the cohorts, I discourage that. I don't say you can't, but I say it might be maybe more comfortable for you to just share it with your tutor, which is the best way to do it so far. And then later on, maybe in the year, if you feel like it's all going well and they're willing to share with everyone, they could. Just a question about assessment. So, are you assessing this as part of the module, or is it something?
It's all part of the portfolio that they've got to hand in around Easter, and so they've got
How many credits for the module?
For the portfolio, or for the whole? It's a 20 credit module,
It's a 20 credit.
and that's 30% of the module mark. But, so all the work that I've done plus those tasks basically will be checked, and then that will be a mark. And in fact, before I give them the mark, with the marking sheet, I have them to set themselves. So they've got to give themselves a mark.
It's not for 30% of what they none of us will complain about whole assessment.
Oh, I don't let them. They try to complain about that. They tried to at the staff union committee. I went back to the module outline form where they said that they needed to work, I think, about 10 hours a week. And I looked at them and I said, do you work 10 hours a week? They said, no. I'm like, well, it's the unkind.
Okay, second question, which was a very nice idea of the student ambassador, what we call the mentors. It's just because you're talking about, if you're talking employability advice, okay. But if you're talking about final years checking the work of first years which is assessed, okay, first year marks don't count, but sometimes it's called collusion.
They wouldn't mark them, they would give them feedback.
Yeah, but it's difficult to draw the line there.
No, because the tutor would mark the tasks. And there was marking the completion of the tasks, more on the tasks.
What type of feedback do you envisage?
It's more, well, they'll be trained to give feedback, and the idea that they won't correct any particular mistakes, but they will say, I've noticed that, you know, your use of the articles is not always right, maybe you should have a look at that again. Just one or two things to improve, that's it. But that's what students want anyway, they want to listen and say they want one or two things that could help.
So what tasks have they got to do in this module, which is 20 credits apart from this?
There is final exam which is worth 40%, and listening test 15 and speaking test 15.
Oh. Our students definitely could put
Oh well, don't let them. I always say to them, I did say to them, you pay £9,000 a year, I don't want you to feel cheated.
I was saying lessons.
I think the clever look is the link between learner autonomy and employability, because I can't see the extra value doing extra work for that.
No, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant one.
Well, I mean, the feedback's been really positive, so...
I wonder if it is Mahara, because I've had terrible problems sharing with my students. I don't understand how I can share with them, they don't understand how to share with me.
I know, Helen dealt with it, but I'm not a technical person. It's just a two-way street, basically. They've got to ask to share with you, and you've got to say yes, and it's like...
Oh, that's Pebble.
It's like, it's like wooing someone.
Sounds like
Pebble. Excuse me interrupting, but shall we carry on the conversation?
Sorry.
All the post-session. Thank you to all the